Last evening, I spoke of Rosh Hashanah as the first day of the rest of our lives. I spoke of Rosh Hashanah as a celebration of the world's creation, a celebration of beginnings and potential and possibility and life itself. On the first day of a new year, on Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate what can be. We allow ourselves to imagine and to dream, and we set our sights on what is possible. On the first day of the new year, on Rosh Hashanah, we reaffirm our commitment to having a hand in repairing and returning our world and ourselves to wholeness and peace. This morning we read the story of creation, the way in which our tradition tells us the world was at its inception, perfect, whole, intact, at peace, without tension, without violence, without pain. Everywhere was Eden. Many of us can picture that iconic image taken from space, the planet Earth, a perfect blue-green marble, no lines dividing one nation-state from another, just land and water, a perfect and beautiful planet floating in space. Rev Yosef Soloveitchik, or as he is known in some circles, simply the Rav. The Rav teaches that when we think of Rosh Hashanah and we reflect on the world's creation, we should also be mindful of the possibility of our own personal recreation. Even as we celebrate the world's origins on Rosh Hashanah, so do we celebrate the potential each of us has within ourselves. Or in the words of poet and former Librarian of Congress Archibald MacLeish, to see the earth as it truly is, small and blue and beautiful, in that eternal silence where it floats, this is to see ourselves. This day is full of potential and possibility for our planet and for ourselves. And so what is it, we might well ask? What is it that keeps us from fully addressing ourselves to the realities of today's world? Lines have been drawn and redrawn. Wars have been fought and are still being fought over them. There is disease and poverty. There is so much human suffering. There is brokenness today in a world that was once, according to tradition, perfect. And what about us? What frustrates our ability to realize our own God-given potential? Permit me to share with you a story. It's a rather strange story about a great rabbinic luminary from the 18th century named Meshulam Zusia. Reb Zusia was well known for his scholarship and his righteousness. And in one of the greatest stories ascribed to him, a story we shall not share this morning, Reb Zusia displays a tremendous sense of personal insight and personal awareness as well. But in this morning's Reb Zusia story, the rabbi is neither particularly righteous, nor studious, nor self-aware. It's a strange story. One day, Reb Zusia was actively engaged in studying a particular page of Torah. His students took note of the serious way he drank in the wisdom of the text. On the following day, Reb Zusia's students, looking over his shoulder, saw their teacher again engrossed in the same passage as he had been learning the day before. And on the following day too, and on many days subsequent, again and again the students observed Reb Zusia diligently focused on the same select verses he had been examining for so many days prior. This was curious to Reb Zusia's students, and so in time they asked their Rebbe, "Why is it that you are still on the same page, day after day?" To which Reb Zusia, ordinarily a man of keen intellect and curiosity, a man of ethics and responsibility, creativity and imagination, responded simply and with a sublime candor, "It feels so comfortable to be in this place. Why should I go elsewhere?" The story ends there. As I told you, it's a strange story. But one might ask, what is it that he was reading? What story that he studied was so compelling? What was the text that so engrossed Reb Zusia's thoughts? What is it that is keeping Reb Zusia from turning the page? Rabbi Henry and I, we co-wrote this sermon, and we would like to imagine that the Rebbe was studying the same selection that we turned to this morning, the story of creation, the story of when the world was new, the story of everything being brand new and full of potential and possibility. And our tradition teaches us that each day the world is created anew, as if for the first time. Each time we awaken in the morning, it is as if we are rising to a new creation. And on Rosh Hashanah especially, when we celebrate the birthday of the world, the day we identify as the moment when possibility entered time and space, we turn our thoughts to our own potential. We turn our thoughts to what we are, each of us, capable of doing, capable of being, capable of realizing in the world. But in order to start, we need to turn the page, which of course brings us back to Reb Zusia and our surmise as to why he didn't or couldn't or wouldn't turn that page. Perhaps we might suggest he was overwhelmed or frustrated or indifferent. Perhaps he was overwhelmed by the scope of the challenges in the world around him. Perhaps he was frustrated, having made earlier attempts and not having realized the fruits of his labor. And perhaps he was indifferent, believing he was already working hard enough, that he was busy enough with his own family and life, his profession, and the challenges he deals with daily. The world is, after all, overwhelming. And this past year has been especially challenging. In just recent days, we have seen images of refugees streaming across borders, boats capsizing, babies' bodies washing up on beaches. The Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, and now Boko Haram have elevated mass kidnappings, ritualized sexual torture, and death by beheading to a religious imperative. Racial tensions flare here at home. This has been the year of Black Lives Matter, which of course is a movement that began only 13 months ago, following the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Black Lives Matter is a movement that is not in any way a violent entity, but it is a response to violence. And to our collective chagrin and shame, this movement has revealed to all of us the enormous disparity in experience and life expectancy between the races in this country. And we cannot fail to speak of the violent perversion of faith that has arisen within the Jewish world in the past year. Just this past July, we learned the story of American-born Israeli settler terrorists in the West Bank village of Duma who burned and killed a family, including an 18-month-old baby, all of whom were sleeping peacefully in their home at the time of the attack. And let us pause to remember 16-year-old Shira Banki, a bright Jewish teenager who, while marching in the Jerusalem Pride Parade on behalf of Israel's LGBT community, was fatally stabbed by a hateful, knife-wielding Jew whose misbegotten understanding of Judaism prompted that act. And of course, we are invited, encouraged, and sometimes even badgered into taking on every cause, each one of them worthy: cancer and heart disease, childhood diseases, the scourge of hunger. It's all heartbreaking and can be overwhelming. Certainly, we want to help, but the people in our own homes need attention, we reason. They need our patience and our understanding and our compassion, and our own goals are left unachieved. How would we even know where to start? We can appreciate that good old Reb Zusia might well have been too overwhelmed to turn the page. And we would not begrudge the good rabbi his frustration. He might well be frustrated, his efforts in the world to make a difference, to effect change. We know that feeling too. We know what it is to be frustrated by the world. It's hard to comprehend that just this past spring, 9 souls lost their lives in a church in Charleston, South Carolina. And why? Because they were not white. But it happened. And we cannot help but to hear echoes of the church bombings that took place at the 16th Street Church in Birmingham, Alabama, 52 years ago tomorrow. 52 years ago tomorrow. And of course, the same rivalries and religious wars in the Middle East have been raging for generations. New ones erupt over the same themes, and we feel grief, but we may not know what to do anymore. In our own lives, we have tried many times and failed so many times to repair this or to adjust that. Yes, we know what it is to be frustrated by the world. We're frustrated too, Reb Zusia, and so we may be inclined to stay on the same page. And finally, who cannot understand Reb Zusia's indifference? The problems are happening so far away. They concern communities that are not our own. The problems don't affect anyone we know personally. Our resources are finite, as is our time, we tell ourselves. There's only so much that we can concern ourselves with, and it's true. But on Rosh Hashanah, giving in to overwhelm or frustration or indifference or excuses, this is not our way. Jewish tradition offers a remarkable response to Reb Zusia's inability and a response to our reluctance to look up from the page we are on, from the busyness of our lives, and to respond to the world around us, to turn the page and to meet the future. Each morning, Jews recite the words, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi, the soul which God has given me, has implanted in me, and again this morning is pure. Every day we are told we have the opportunity to return to our purest selves, to our most noble aspirations, to our best intentions. On Rosh Hashanah, the first morning of a new year, as we recall the purity of the world at its inception, so do we draw inspiration from our souls, calling us to be involved in recreating our worlds, both inner and external. My soul came to me pure, begins the prayer, drawn from the reservoir of the holy. All the time it remains within me, I am thankful for its thirst, for compassion and justice. Let my eyes behold the beauty of all creatures, and let my hands know the privilege of righteous deeds. And thus, on Rosh Hashanah morning, our tradition tells us, on the first morning of a new year, we tell ourselves, we ought not feel constrained by what is. Instead, let us imagine what can be. Let us not bemoan what you or I or we have not yet become. Rather, this day, let us resolve to turn the page and to become who we were created to be. What if these were the words Reb Zusia was stuck upon? The opening words of Genesis, wherein we see an image of the world intact, whole, uncorrupted, and at peace. An entire world in the image, if you will, of the Garden of Eden. A world like each of us on this day, full of potential, possibility, and purity of soul. On Rosh Hashanah, as we turn back to the story of God's perfect creation, we look up, we turn a page, we look out upon the future, and we pledge to step boldly with one another into the day, into the new year, into the future that is ours to create and to repair together. Shana Tova.